Morning, everybody. We are here at a session, DEV320, Advanced Feature Flags, Faster Releases, and Rapid Recovery. So if that's what you thought you're going to hear about, you're in the right place. My name is Steve Rice. I'm General Manager for AWS App Config, also Parameter Store. Today we're going to focus on feature flags and actually use App Config as the code talk example. So there are other solutions out there for feature flagging. I was quickly talking to some people. A lot of people are using a homegrown solution. We're going to show you App Config. Some of the concepts are available on other services or other offerings as well. First, I just want to say we want this to be interactive. I think code talks they're one of my favorite types of sessions, and it's way more fun when people are interactive. So we do want questions along the way. I probably will cut us off at some point with the questions so we can keep moving forward. We do have a lot of content to cover. Ben's got to write a lot of code. And so please raise your hand. I have a microphone. I might just repeat your question so everybody can hear this. But first, just real quick, just how many people, this is your first reInvent? Okay, wow, great, welcome. Hope you're having a great time. Hope you're getting in a lot of steps. I'm sure you are. How many have been to 2 reInvents? Okay, 3, 4, 5, 6, anybody 6 or more? 6, 7? Wow. 8? Dang. 9? Okay, 8, you're the record? Okay, cool. I have swag that I'm going to give to you outside of the session. So I'm going to give you, I didn't see who it was, find me, and I have a jacket for you. I have some swag that is an incentive for participation. I'll give it out at the end outside. Great, so again, my name is Steve Rice. I've been using feature flags for a very long time, really excited to talk about feature flags. I feel like they're the secret weapon of moving fast when you're developing software, as well as responding to issues on production, flipping flags as operational flags to address an issue that's out there. So I'm joined by Ben. You want to introduce yourself, please?
Hey everyone, my name's Ben. I am a senior software development engineer at AWS, and I work primarily on the AWS App Config team.
Great. So in terms of where you are on your feature flagging journey, I'm going to ask how many people are using a homegrown solution for feature flagging? Okay. Actually, I should really ask, how many people are not using feature flags at all yet? Okay, a couple people, yep. That's totally fine. Homegrown usually is a lot of hands. And again, I've worked at many companies. We've started with a homegrown solution. What often happens is you realize that, hey, there's some new capabilities that we need beyond just having a database or an S3 bucket to flip on and off things. And should we move off of our homegrown? Should we develop those features in-house? And that's a decision that you all have to make. But App Config is obviously a third-party solution, but we're well integrated into AWS and have integrations with a lot of computes. So in order to sort of set the table for today, we're going to role play a little with me. I'm going to pretend that I'm a business owner and Ben is an engineer, and he's going to use feature flags. So the situation I'm trying to create here is I own a coffee shop. It's called Lambda Latte. Which is, maybe I don't know about AWS, but I'm a business owner. I don't know much about technology. Ben is my brother-in-law, and I heard he's a good coder, so I asked him, will you please make an app? And I really need this app for my business. I'm really good at making coffee. I'm not great at technology, so I'm not going to be like a solid business owner that's going to understand the requirements process. I'm going to change my mind a lot. And to be honest, feature flags are a really good solution for some of these things. So Ben and I had prepared a little bit of a pre-seeded demo here of a coffee shop app from a place called Lambda Latte.
Great.
Ben,
yeah,
actually, if you want to sort of explain the background here, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll walk us through that application now. So as Steve mentioned, we're going to be using this Lambda Latte application as our base for our feature flag demos today. So the purpose of this application is for customers of the Lambda Latte coffee shop to download the app and see some information about the coffee shop, place orders, things of that nature. I'll give you a quick walk through the app since we're going to be spending a decent amount of time on this today. I just want to give a quick overview to make sure that we all understand what the context around these demos is. So I'm looking at the Lambda Latte app. We can see it has 3 tabs. On the Home tab, I can see some information about the coffee shop, how many orders are in flight. Maybe I'm rushing to the office and I want to see if there's a long line or not, then I could look here. We've got today's featured roaster. We have equipment status. No one likes showing up at the coffee shop and all the espresso machines are down right, so you can check that here. And then, of course, we have the stock of the various types of milk that the shop has left. We also have a couple other tabs I'll show quickly. We have a My Rewards tab, which shows you the rewards that you currently have. And then finally, we have an Order tab, which is basically the full menu and the ability to place an order. Now, there's one more thing you'll notice about this demo application is that there's a selection at the top for the customer profile. So since this is a demo, this app lets us view the app through the lens of different users. So right now, we're looking at the app through the lens of Elena, who is our default user. We also have two other customer profiles that we'll be clicking on. So we have Marcus and Jasper, and these two users have a loyalty status associated with them, gold and platinum, and that will come into play in a later demo. So just for now, realize this is a way that we can quickly just switch between different users of the application. For now, there's no difference between any of these three views, but that will change. Okay, that's the Lambda Latte application from the customer's point of view. However, since this is a code talk, I want to spend some time up front talking about the actual architecture behind this application and how it's set up and where the code is that we're going to be modifying later in the talk. So in order to do that, I'm going to switch over to Kiro, and I've got some steering docs set up, one of which is architecture.md, which outlines the architecture for the application. Render the preview of that so we can take a look. So here's my setup. I have the Lambda Latte at the top, the Lambda Latte front-end web application, which is hosted at some domain. This is making requests to my backend, which is really just an AWS Lambda function. And the purpose of this Lambda function is to effectively just get feature flag values from app-config. Now, in order to get those feature flag values from app-config, it's actually using the app-config agent, which is a sidecar process that we, the app-config team, vend to simplify your integration with app-config. It has some built-in resiliency features so that your flags are highly available, even if you're having networking issues, et cetera. In the Lambda context, this is vended as a layer or an extension. That's why it says layer there. And then, of course, this agent or layer is talking to the AWS app-config service directly. So this is the setup architecture for the application. It's fairly straightforward. Does anyone have any questions about how this is set up? Does this generally make sense? Lambda function backend, front-end web app. Okay. Now, since this is a live demo, you can see here this diagram is titled production environment. Since this is a live demo, I don't want to spend time every time I update my code redeploying a Lambda function, et cetera. So I have a local development environment set up that will let me change code and affect those changes instantly instead of waiting for deployments. That setup is here. It's very similar to the production setup that we just looked at. The differences are that everything is running locally. So the Lambda Latte app I have running locally. I have a local HTTP test server that just directly invokes my Lambda logic, my Lambda backend logic. I have the app-config agent running locally, and then we have the app-config service. Now, do note the app-config service here, I'm not running that locally. This is the real production app-config service. Okay, any questions about architecture before I move on to looking at the code? Great.
Ben, I have a question.
Yeah?
You're showing Lambda. Does this feature flags work in things beyond Lambda?
Great question. Yes, app-config works anywhere. So I mentioned the app-config agent. We vend this agent in Lambda as a layer. However, we also vend the agent as a container image, so you can use it in places like ECS, EKS, or your own Kubernetes cluster, or just Docker running on your laptop. We also vend the agent as an RPM, so you can download it on EC2 instances or on-prem instances. Okay, let's take a look at the code. So as the diagram mentioned, we have this appconfig.py. I'm going to make sure this is large enough. Appconfig.py file, which is our Lambda function logic. So you can see we have this top-level function, Lambda handler. It takes in event and context. If you're familiar with Lambda functions, these are the two inputs that all Lambda functions take. And in this case, we have a request structure that looks like this that we see on lines 17 through 22. I'm basically providing a dictionary called flags, and within that dictionary, I'm including the keys of the flags that I would like the function to retrieve. Now, you'll notice that these keys are also pointing to empty dictionaries in this case. We're ignoring those for now. They'll come into play later. The response structure has a flags dictionary as well. And then for the provided keys, it will populate the feature flag value that was returned by the app config service. So in this case, the piece that's highlighted on the screen now, this is what the app config service said the flag value was for flag 1. We also have another top-level field called errors. So if anything goes wrong with retrieving one or more of your flags, then you'll see those keys appear in this section, and there'll be some reasoning as to why those flags could not be retrieved. In this case, not found. OK, so I'm going to just quickly give an overview of how this code is set up. We have some setup code that's reading some environment variables, parsing the event data. The main logic is here, where I'm going through each of the flag keys in the request, and I'm getting that flag from the app config agent. Finally, I'm building my response, handling errors, and returning. As far as the get flag from agent code, this is making, again, a localhost HTTP request. This is the same in the dev environment and in the prod environment. The request looks exactly like this to the app config agent, and I'm asking the agent for that particular flag and doing some error handling. OK, that's the overview of our backend code. This is the primary file that we're going to be modifying throughout our demos in this session, so I want to make sure we have a high-level overview first before we dive into the changes. OK, the last thing I want to show, I mentioned that we're using the production app config service for these demos. So I'll come back to my browser and move the Lambda Latte app to the side, pull up the app config console. And in the app config console, I am looking at a feature flag configuration called Lambda Latte. And this configuration currently has 3 feature flags in it, which we're going to use at various points through our demos. And with that, that's an overview of the Lambda Latte application, its architecture, how it works, how it integrates with the app config service. So that's going to lay the baseline for the demos that we're going to be talking about during the session today. Any questions about how this is set up or what the application's purpose is or its architecture or anything like that? OK. Great.
And to the technical people in the room, you explained it really well, but I'm a business owner, and I got this coffee that I need to sell. And what I have learned from my customers is around December, they love to have a peppermint spice type of coffee, like the peppermint spice latte is like a really hot seller. And people talk about it. And what I'd really love to have, I don't know how it'll work, but I'd like to have the app updated. And I think I want to have some text about a peppermint spice update, but like I want to promote this, this drink in my app. So can you just make that happen?
Yes, I can just make that happen.
All right, great.
OK, so let's talk about this first use case where we want to promote a product on our website. In this case, it's the Lambda Latte app, and we want to promote the peppermint. I think it's called peppermint candy cane latte.
Yeah,
that we're promoting here. OK, so to do this, this is really meant to be a baseline, just feature flags 101 type demo. So I already have the code that's required in the front end web application, and the back end Lambda function that's required to do this simple flag retrieval and rendering this simple banner experience. So we're not actually going to dive into the code for that for the sake of time. Again, this is just meant to be a very simple feature flags 101 demo off the bat here. So I can see in my feature flag config, I have this one flag called featured item. And this featured item flag, if I scroll down, here's the toggle button for my flag. It's currently off. We're going to turn that on. You'll also notice this section called attribute values. So app config feature flags are more than just an on-off switch. It can just be an on-off switch, but we also provide this functionality called attributes, which is effectively just arbitrary metadata that you attach to a feature flag. And it's really powerful because you can use those attributes to actually drive the behavior of your application. And so in this case, we have 3 attributes that are defined. We have a description, a name, and a price. And these values that are set in this feature flag are actually going to be used by the front-end web application to render the experience. So turning this flag on will turn the banner on, and then the value of these attribute values determines the content of that banner. OK, so I've turned this flag on. What I need to do now is save my changes and deploy it. So in app config, every time you make a change, every config change, feature flags included, are versioned. And so when I save a new version of my config, I need to go deploy that new version, which is what I'm doing now. Since this is a demo, I'm going to do what we call an instant deployment. We don't recommend instant deployments in any production use case. We'll talk more about, we call this deployment safety. We'll talk about this a little bit more later. But since this is a demo, I'm going to go ahead and do an instant deployment. Now, I will say when I click the Start Deployment button, the console, the app config console on the left-hand side is going to render a new screen that's going to look really exciting, and you're going to want to see what that screen is doing. Don't look at that screen after I click this button. Look at the right-hand side. Look at the Lambda Latte app, because that's where the banner is going to be appearing. So let's start this deployment and keep our eyes on the Lambda Latte app. And there we go. Our featured item banner is now displayed. I didn't make any code changes. I didn't redeploy my backend. I didn't redeploy my front end. I just made a change in the app config console. I will also, to highlight the power of attributes, if I change this, I don't know, peppermint candy cane latte 2, and I save this and update it and deploy it. Then we should see the content update. There we go. Okay. Steve, what do you think about that promotion?
I love it. That's exactly what I'm looking for. Can I make it go away after Christmas?
Absolutely.
Cool. Sorry for the corniness of the simulation. We actually didn't practice this as much. So, okay, great. But my next request as a business owner is I do have this loyalty concept, but really today it doesn't really land. And I've heard that if I reward my best customers in certain ways, and I can tailor those rewards, that they'll actually spend more money. So is there a way that I can sort of look at different layers and maybe give a different kind of flag to each type of user?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so for this featured item banner demonstration that we just did, it's important to note that this experience that we just rendered it's the same for everyone, right? So I'm viewing the app as Elena now, and I see the banner. I view the app as Marcus, I see the same banner. View the app as Jasper, and I see the same banner. There's no differentiation between the different users and the experience that they're seeing. And so the ask now from the business owner is, okay, well, I want to do something a little bit more sophisticated than that. I want to render different experiences for different types of customers or segments of customers that we call them. And in this case, the segmentation is based on the user's loyalty status. And based on their loyalty status, what we want to do is render different sets of rewards depending on loyalty status. So if I click the My Rewards tab right now, I'll see currently I'm Jasper, who's a Platinum loyalty member. I just have a single reward here. It's a free espresso. It's code R-001. Okay. If I switch over to Marcus, he's a gold member. Well, I see the same thing. And of course, Elena, as you may suspect, the exact same rewards. And so the ask is, okay, well, I want to honor my most valued customers, and I want to offer different sets of rewards to customers that are in different loyalty statuses. So let's do that with a feature flag. First, I'm going to go back to my featured item. I'm actually going to turn this off so I can save some screen real estate here. We've got a bit of a small screen here. So let me just deploy this. And we should see that banner turn off. Okay, it's gone. Okay, so let's talk about how we can make this use case work with a feature flag. So in app config, we have two types of feature flags, which are denoted by this selector down here at the bottom. The previous flag that we looked at is what we call a basic flag. And a basic flag is really just, it's the same for all end users, right? I turn something on, I turn something off. It's the same for everyone. It's a basic flag. However, if I have a more advanced use case, like customer segmentation, like we have in the coffee shop demo here, then I can create what's called a multivariant flag. A multivariant flag is a flag that allows me to create alternative feature flag values and therefore alternative user experiences for different sets of users based on some rules that I define. So I actually already have this one set up so that we can talk through it without me having to click a bunch of buttons. So we'll see, if you remember when we're looking at our basic flag, when we're looking at it's called the flag value section at the bottom, we just had a single toggle. We had a single set of attributes. Variance builds on that and allows you to define the toggle state and the attribute values for each what we call variant. And in this case, I have 3 variants. I have platinum, gold, and default. And each variant has a rule that I define. Now, this is kind of a compressed view. So I'm actually going to open this in the split panel so we can get a better view of these variants. So again, I have 3 variants, platinum, gold, and default. Taking a deeper look at the platinum variant, I can see that it's turned on. I want rewards enabled for my platinum customers. And I have an attribute called items, which lists the reward codes for the rewards that I would like to offer to my platinum customers. Also, this variant has a rule. This is a fairly simple rule where it's checking if the customer's loyalty status is equal to the string platinum. Now, you'll notice, or rather, when you request a multivariant feature flag from the app config agent, in this case, you pass in what we call request context. So rather than just saying, I want flag ABC, you say, I want flag ABC, and the user type is admin, and the user's loyalty status is none, and the user joined on whatever date, et cetera, whatever type of context that's relevant to the rules that you author for your multivariant feature flag. So in the case of the Lambda Latte app, we're just interested in this loyalty status piece. So we have a pretty simple rule that serves that use case. However, note that rules can get fairly complex within app config. So I can do some different operations. I'm just going to clear this. There's a bunch of operations we support. We can talk about this more later. For now, I'm just going to continue with the demo. It also supports compound rules, so ands and ors, et cetera. So you can get fairly complex and specific with the types of users that you want to target with different experiences. OK, the gold variant is probably not very surprising. I'm checking loyalty status equals gold for my rule, and I'm limiting the items to R1 and R2. And then my default variant. The default variant doesn't have a rule because this is kind of your fallback. So if you make a request to the agent and the context that you provide doesn't match any rules of the other variants, then this is the fallback default variant that's served to that request. So in this case, we just have R-001 for those customers. OK, so this is our multivariant flag that models how we want to display different types of rewards to different customers. Now again, since this is a demo, I've already got the front-end code in place to basically pull this flag, parse the items attribute value, the list of items, and it does like a quick lookup to say, oh, R1 is this reward, R2 is this reward, et cetera. So the front-end code is already written. However, the back-end code is not sufficiently set up to pass this request context that I've been talking about to the app config agent, which is why, again, I just did a deployment in the previous demo which deploys all of my flags, since I have them in the same configuration, which means this is actually my live config right now. But remember when I clicked through the different customer profiles earlier, we were seeing the same experience for every customer. Everyone was just seeing one reward, and that's because I haven't made that back-end update yet to properly pass in request context and get the proper variant for the given end user, and then render that experience appropriately. So what we're going to do now is go into the backend and make that code change to properly retrieve a multivariant feature flag from the app config agent. So let's do that. Let's head back into Kiro. And let's open the appconfig.py file, which is, of course, my Lambda backend logic. And we are going to go through this code and make a couple updates to properly handle and pass request context to the app config agent. So earlier we were talking about the input event structure, and we had the flags dictionary, and each flag, or each key in that dictionary had in itself an empty dictionary. So what we're going to do is we're going to take advantage of that empty dictionary and use it as a place to put request context. And so I would have something like, in the case of the Lambda Latte app, I would have loyalty status, for example, gold. So now our request structure, or with the code updates that we're about to make, our request structure will support this type of request where context is included. So how do we do that? Firstly, let's go directly to the code that's making requests to the app config agent, because this is where request context is passed in. So you'll see right now we have our what's called here the base URL for the app config agent, which again is running on localhost port 2772. Happens to be the default port for the app config agent. You can set it to whatever you like. And the way this request is working right now is it's saying, with the example I was using earlier, it's saying, hey, app config agent, give me flag ABC. But what we want to do is update it to say, hey, give me flag ABC, but also pass in or use this context. So let's do that. So the way we do this is by passing in an HTTP header called context. And so let me just write out what I'm doing. Add request context in context HTTP header. And just to give you a visual before we actually write this code, here are some examples of the context header. So the key is context, and in the case of Lambda Latte, I might be doing something like this: loyalty status equals gold. That's of course a single context value, but we support an arbitrary number of context values, so you can also do something like this, where you say the context is k1 equals v1, comma, k2 equals v2. So you can pass in as much context as you like. Okay, so what does the code actually look like? So if I have, well, first I need to update my function signature to actually accept request context. Right now it only accepts the flag key, but, excuse me, in addition to the flag key, we also want to accept request context. What do we do with that request context? Well, if there is request context present, then I want to basically build the HTTP header like we have in the examples on the lines above. So the first thing I'm going to do is create this variable called context parts. And this is effectively going to build my key equals value piece of my header. So I'll take just build this here, and then for key value in request context dot items. So I'll iterate through my request context, and I'll create this k equals v type setup, and then I will create the actual header content, which of course will join these k equals v parts into a comma separated list, which then of course we will add to our HTTP request. We'll add the header called context, and we will pass in the context header. Okay, so now when my backend code makes a request to the app config agent, it's going to include this request context in the context header so that the agent can evaluate it and return the appropriate variant for my particular end user that's making the request. Yes?
So you're basically doing request calls to your agent. Is the agent enabling all the caching to AWS?
That's absolutely correct.
Ben, can you repeat the question?
Yes, so the question is, so in this code, I'm making requests to localhost 2772, which is the app config agent. And the question is, every time I make a request to the agent, is that making another request to AWS, or is the agent handling the caching? Is that the question? That's right. The agent's handling the caching. So the way that multivariant feature flags work is each time you pass in, so the first time you request this flag, yes, there's going to be a call to the app config service to get the configuration information. But then for each subsequent request, regardless of the context, there's no new network call being made. The agent is locally caching the config and locally evaluating the rules. So that way you get the resiliency of not having to have all these network calls. You get the performance improvement of not having to wait for the network calls. And then of course the performance of doing the actual evaluation locally within the agent instead of on the remote app config service. So you get that really performant rule evaluation. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. So if you have already have this instance going, there's no issue that you just use this.
Yeah, you would just use this. Yeah, so the agent works as your cache for app config data. Yeah, there's no need to insert a cache of your own. Great, thank you.
We got
Other
some
questions?
Questions, yeah.
One here.
What happens when that cache gets stale? What is the gifted value of this cache?
So the way the cache works is by default, it will never evict any data. So this is a resiliency strategy that we use. For example, if you get, so let me back up for a second. So the way the cache works is the agent will obviously make that initial call to app config, pull the configuration data, in this case the feature flags, and then what happens is it spins up a background thread within the agent that periodically pings the app config service asking, hey, you have any updates for this config? And so that'll happen it's a configurable cadence. By default, it's every 45 seconds. It'll check in with the app config service to say, hey, do you have any updates for this config? Right? And that process continues in the background for the life of the agent process, right? And so there's no data eviction. If there's some kind of network event that cuts off your access to app config or all of AWS at some point, then the agent will still serve the latest config data that it knows about from its cache.
How persistent is that cache? It's just the life of the session.
Good question.
Can you repeat the question?
How persistent is the agent cache? The answer is that by default, or I shouldn't say by default, but there's a few layers of, I'll say, resiliency that the agent offers. And so the first, obviously, is in-memory, which I've already talked about. But that doesn't help you much if your application restarts or if your host reboots, et cetera. And so we have additional features built in to protect against that type of scenario. For example, we have an on-disk backup option that you can enable. And so that's not available in Lambda, of course, which is what this demo is about. However, if you're running in a container environment or if you're running on EC2 or on-prem, et cetera, then it's a best practice to enable that on-disk backup mechanism so that in addition to the in-memory caching, you get the on-disk caching. OK. There's a question here in the middle, yes?
When you're showing the deployment, what exactly is being deployed?
Yeah, so the question is, when I'm showing the deployment, what actually is being deployed? And the answer is that I'm deploying my configuration data through app-config. So app-config is a feature flagging service. Feature flags are a special type of configuration. And what app-config does at its core is it allows you to create versions of your configuration data and then deploy those, deploy your configuration data by version, right? And each version is an immutable set of data. You can't change it, right? This is one of the key value props of app-config is that your data is immutable. And when you want to change it, it's more than just creating it. You have to create it and deploy it. And the benefit of that is if you decide, you make a deployment and then you decide, oh, wait, this is breaking something or it's not working the way that I want, then you can roll back that deployment and you go back to the last known state of the config, right? Does that make sense?
So it's not the entire application deployment, right? Just the configuration.
Exactly. Yeah, so you saw the app config deployments that I was doing earlier. Those, of course, were instant deployments, so they happen instantly. And so you saw how our application updated after I did that deployment. It's just it's a kind of app config as a control plane kind of concept. It's not taking host out of service. It's not deploying software. It's just deploying the newest version of my configuration in the app config service. Okay.
One of the things that we do, and we can get to other questions in a second, but that's really important for app config is the idea that you should deploy slowly and gradually. Every change that you make, including a configuration change, could break your production environment. And if you think back to the last 18 months, a lot of the major outages of providers have been related to configuration changes that were deployed everywhere all at once. So Ben's demo showed an instant deployment. That's a bit of an anti-pattern. He's doing a demo, so it would be boring for you to wait 15 minutes. But I'll say we use app-config inside of AWS and Amazon, and we have a policy that it has to be at least 30 minutes of a deployment and bake time for any change of configuration, unless you're breaking glass and you need to address something right away. You can do that with app-config. But yeah, this idea of, it's just similar to like a code, it's the metaphor of a code pipeline, right? It is, I'm deploying configuration in the way similar that I deploy code gradually.
Okay, we'll take one more question in this section, then we'll move on with the demo here up front.
Is it possible to have the agent evaluate differently based on whether or not it can reach the app config service? I'm thinking about cases where there might be a security sensitive configuration that you might want to fail closed on in case the service can.
The agent doesn't have anything like that.
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, sorry. The question is, can I change effectively the response that the agent returns based on the availability of the app config service? Or the reachability of the app config service, I should say. Is that correct? Yes. The answer is no, there's no built-in way in the agent to do that right now. So if you want functionality like that, then you would have a thin wrapper around your agent calls that say, for this set of flags or whatever, use this default value if I can't retrieve it. Right? Does that make sense? Okay. Okay, let's move on with this demo. We will get to more questions later. So again, what are we doing? We're trying to update the content of our My Rewards tab on the Lambda Latte app to be different based on customers' loyalty status. And so what we did is we made some code changes. And there's one more change that I need to make. So this function get flag from agent, I've added request context. I need to actually pass that context up in my main handler function, so let's do that. So now when I look through my request object, instead of just looking at the keys, I'm going to look at the entire item. And I'm going to do flag key, request context, and then when I call get flag from agent, I will pass in request context. Okay, and I believe that's all the changes I need. Let me take a quick peek. Okay. So I made some changes to my backend code, so now I have to restart my backend. So let's do that. Okay, it's running again. Now let's head back to the application. And the rewards tab should be working, but it's not, of course. Check on a couple other users. Okay, so something is broken. Let me try. Like I said, live demos are fun. Live coding is even better. So let me restart things. And we will give this a shot. Okay, I'm not sure what the bug is here. What I was expecting to see is for Elena, who doesn't have loyalty status, I was expecting to see reward 1, and then for Marcus, who has gold status, rewards 1 and 2, and then Jasper with status platinum to see 4 rewards. I think doing live debugging is going to take too long.
I've heard the audience loves it when it doesn't go perfectly, Ben, so you nailed it.
I don't love it when it doesn't go perfectly, but.
Do you have? We have somebody
what was that?
is going to debug for you, Ben.
Oh, we have a debugger in the crowd?
You did request.add header there.
Yes.
Find your request object header. You find down in the try block.
Oh, yeah, that's a good call. How about we put this block of code after this variable exists? All right, good eye.
Thank you.
Okay, wow, thank you. Okay, so again, Jasper, our platinum member, has 4 rewards. Marcus, our gold member, has 2 rewards. And Elena, our default status member, has a single reward. So again, what's the point of this? The point is that we can use a feature flag to render dynamic experiences for different segments of customers. In this case, for the Lambda Latte demo example, the segment is based on the user's loyalty status. Okay, Steve, does that fulfill your business requirements?
Absolutely. That gives me a lot of flexibility and allows me to customize. And that's a more advanced type of feature flag. This multivariant flag. Again, a lot of customers think of feature flags as a gate to releasing new capability, but you can use it for a lot more than that. I'm going to take off the hat of the Lambda Latte coffee shop owner and talk to you a little bit about some other feature flag use cases. So again, the idea of a release flag is mostly what people think about feature flags. I'm going to have my code hide the functionality behind some sort of a toggle. And then I'm going to deploy the code, but nobody can get to it because the toggle is off. Then I'm going to turn it on slowly. That's really important, that I'm going to turn on for 1% of my fleet or 1% of my audience. You have configurable options for that. And over time, I'm going to increase that. 10%, everything's going well. 20%, everything's going well. 40%, oh my gosh, something went wrong. And we do see this inside of AWS sometimes, that you don't see these problems until you really start to hit a scale. So again, the idea of just a culture of I'm going to develop quickly but release slowly is really important when you're using feature flags. So that's sort of a release thing. I'll tell you, one of the big, I think I said, AppConfig is the feature flagging solution for Amazon and AWS. It's how we think you should use feature flags. One of the big weeks, this week is a really big week for AppConfig. when people are on stage announcing something, announcing this new capability, that code was actually pushed to production a couple weeks ago, but it was all hidden so you couldn't access it. Then feature flags are being flipped as Matt Garman is on stage and Peter DeSantis is on stage to make sure that that thing lights up. So it's a great tool to sort of control, and the engineers are not like sitting there trying to do CI/CD deployments while Matt Garman's talking. The code's already out there, and all they do is a small feature flag deployment. The other big thing, big week for us is actually last week. Last week was Black Thursday in the United States. It's a really big shopping week, and on Amazon.com. What's that?
Black Friday.
Sorry, the day after Thanksgiving. Black Friday is a really big shopping day, and Amazon.com uses AppConfig to control during peak events. So if you bought something, sometimes who's bought something on Amazon.com? Most people will raise their hand. If you bought something, you always see people that bought this also bought this, and it's a really cool suggestion, and most of the time it's appreciated. Well, if you're on Black Friday, you're going to still notice that, but you might only see 3 suggestions of things that you might want to buy instead of the normal 5 to 7 things. And you can imagine why that might be on a peak event. When people are using the website a lot, we want to actually have less expensive queries to the back end to get 3 different things. So that's more what we call an operational flag. So the first one is that release flag, and Ben demoed that. There's something that we use AppConfig all the time for called an operational flag. That allows you to respond quickly to things on production. I can have something like a throttling limit. So if you have an application that's a bad actor, and you have an application where you have a bad actor that's messing around with your infrastructure, whatever, and you want to just block that account ID, you don't want to have to push out a code change to block that, let that go through your CI/CD. That could take minutes or hours for it to go through a code deployment. You want to be able to respond to that immediately. And so using configuration data and an ops flag to allow certain customers or block certain customers is a common use case as well. And you can just push that out immediately, block that person. Another use case we see is like you might want to throttle the number of background processes that are operating at peak time. I used to work at a company where at the end of every quarter, there needed to be a lot of reports generated for our customers. So the customer could click a button and generate reports. And we wanted that report to be as quickly as possible in the customer's hands. But since it was the end of the quarter, every quarter, people all on the same day would be requesting that. And so we basically had a queuing system that we would turn on with a feature flag that says, hey, I want to queue these requests, and then I'll email them a copy of the report rather than generate it real time for them. So again, a great way to operationally handle what's going on. I think we have something about in our abstract about like responding to security events quickly. So another use case we see a lot by our customers and inside of Amazon is the toggling of the verbosity of your logging. So you normally are going to be running your logging, of course, at info level. But something might be going wrong, you're not sure, and you want to get a lot more information. So you can actually flip with a feature flag or an operational flag the verbosity from info to debug. And Ben, I know you have a demo on that, right?
Yep.
Okay, great.
We take a look at that.
Great, thanks.
All right. Okay, again, so the previous 2 demos were about what we call release flags, where you're controlling the release of some kind of feature. Question? Yeah, go ahead.
We might end up having a lot of release flags. So say some problem.
I'm having a little bit of trouble hearing you.
So say there might be a situation we might end up with a lot of dormant.
Release flags. Stale release flags and cleanup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the case. If I have to do a cleanup, I mean, I can turn it off here. Maybe there is a feature here. But should I make code changes to clean it up there as well for a specific, say in this case, it's lambda.
Yeah.
There are a lot of sub-feature flags for that. But I won't use it in future. I just need one specific feature, I turn it on. That's all.
Right.
So if I have to do a cleanup, do I have to clean up in the code? Because I was not sure. The endpoint
Right.
listed there has specifically this lambda library there.
Right. So the question is, if I have these flags that have been around for a while and I'm not using them anymore, sure, I can delete them from AppConfig, but do I also need to go clean up my code? Is that the question? Yes. The answer, do you have to clean up the code? Technically, no, but it is highly, highly recommended, right? Because over the course of time, fundamentally, when you're adding a feature flag to your code, you're adding a branch in your logic, right? And so if time goes on and you end up with hundreds or in some cases thousands of feature flags and you have thousands of unnecessary branches in your code, it's ripe for disaster someday, right? The developer is going to come in and they think they're changing something unrelated, but really they changed how a feature flag's evaluated, and then your application just starts behaving unexpectedly. So yes, as far as the cleanup story goes, yes, you can delete them from app config. We also recommend deleting or cleaning up rather your code where you introduced that branch, right?
And do you mind showing the little short-term flag, as we have a little mechanism in the console here that you can see?
So if I create a new feature flag by clicking this Add New Flag button, I'll do a basic flag, and we have this box here that's called This is a short-term flag. And so when I do this, at the time that I'm creating my feature flag, I can say, hey, this is a short-term flag, and I have a target deprecation date of, let's say, end of Q1. And so now when I'm looking at my list of flags in my app config account, I can sort by deprecation date, and I can see, oh, these are the ones that I shouldn't be using anymore. I said I wouldn't be using it by this date, so let me go check on that and see if I should clean that up.
Yeah, app config won't delete that flag on your behalf. That'd be really risky for the service to do, but it will remind you that you have quote unquote overdue flags that you want to go look at. We know that when an engineer creates a flag, they have a guess about when it will be deprecated, but it's not super reliable. So it just uses a kind of a reminder system. Yeah, I don't know if you have this set up in your demo, but basically in the console, if you're using the console, you can see overdue flags. You can filter for overdue flags. You can also do that on your own. Everything you see in the console is obviously available via API and CloudFormation and Terraform, et cetera. So you can look at that data too.
So the logging value is an interesting one. This is a problem that we've had where developers have turned on debug logs and we forgot, and then it ends up blowing up like our logging just costs.
Yeah.
So if this is a solution for that and you set this, it won't necessarily turn it back off after a certain period of time.
Correct. I mean, depending on the use case, you hear that a lot at AWS. Depending on the use case, if you want to have logging on for a couple of months, then I think this could be kind of helpful to remind you, hey, you should update this flag. If you are just turning on for a couple hours, I don't think this would be a good application. You probably need a different mechanism for flipping that. Another question over there, sir. When you create a flag, can you create a what?
Yeah, that's part of the metadata here on this creation screen.
Yeah.
Your code does not have access to this value. It's just in the app config control plane where you can see this. Yeah. That's correct. You could, of course, add an attribute we talked about earlier and just put it in there too. But yes, the deprecation date, this field strictly is not included in the response. Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about it quite a bit as a service team about how we would want to have customers use it. And it's too risky to have people just automatically are putting a process in to delete a flag. So we purposely chose to not expose that down into the agent.
Yeah, we actually have a somewhat new feature that we released that we call deletion protection. So if you go try to delete any kind of config, app config obviously supports feature flags. We also support what we call freeform config, which is bring your own config data. We don't care what the format is. You just give us the data and we manage the versioning and the deployments. In that case, if you go try, we track your usage of it or track the requests that you're making for it. And if you try to delete that config and we say, oh, you have live traffic on this thing, then by default we'll say, hey, you can't delete this unless you click the I know what I'm doing button. For example, we don't have that for individual flags at this point in time, but we do have it at the config level, right? Okay, let's do the logging verbosity demo and then we'll come back to more questions if there are any. So I'm going back to my Lambda Latte config and we're going to take a look at our third and final flag, which is called log level. This flag has an attribute called level. And of course, right now it's set to info. Actually, before I change this, I'm going to go back to the Lambda Latte application and pull up the logs. So let's take a look at the JavaScript console here. I just cleared it out, so there's nothing here. You can see it's not printing anything right now. Nothing interesting is happening. What I want to do is go in and edit my flag and change this to debug. And you'll notice another thing about app config feature flag attributes is that they allow you to add constraints to them. So in this case, I've said, hey, this is a string, and I don't want any values to be allowed except the ones that I've defined here. So we call it enum. It also supports regular expressions. So if I come in here, and I'm debugging something at 3 in the morning, and I want to flip the logs, and I'm just trying to do this quickly, and I'm half awake, and I accidentally put a space in here, then app-config's going to tell me, hey, you can't do that because it doesn't match the enum, right? So it's another convenient or powerful feature of attributes or constraints. So let's turn on debug logging. I'm going to update my feature flag and deploy it. So we'll start that deployment, and then I'll come over to my console, and I'll expect in the next couple seconds for my debug logs to come in, which are going to show like, hey, I'm about to make a request for this user to the backend. Here's how the backend responded. About to make a request for this user to the backend. Here's how the backend responded. So this is happening. I think it's every 5 seconds that this is happening. And we can see these are my debug logs. And then, of course, when I'm done, I can go turn it back off. If you're worried about forgetting about turning debug logs off, because it can get quite expensive over the course of time, something that you could do is set up like a CloudWatch alarm, so you could emit a metric on your log level, and then you could set up an alarm that, if your log level stays something more granular than info for, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hours, whatever it is, then that alarm can go red to alert your on-calls so oh, we forgot to turn that thing off. So that could be one strategy for remembering to turn this back off. Okay, great. That's the ops flag demo with logging level use case.
We have about 10 minutes left. We're going to cover just the idea. If I can spend 2 minutes, and we'll just have questions. 2 minutes covering a couple of other things. I said this before, but feature flags are very seductive. People think it's no big deal just to flip a feature flag. If something goes wrong, I'm going to flip it back. But you can see from how we have set up our service, they're very dangerous. 99.9% of the time, no problems. But when they go wrong, things can go really wrong. If you were around for 2017 S3 outage in US East 1, that was an extra semicolon in a configuration change. And that was before app-config existed. And that was part of the reason we launched app-config internally. So these things do require kind of a culture change. It requires caution. You should treat your configuration like it's code and make sure that you're not just willy-nilly pushing things to production, just like you wouldn't push untested code to production. But they're super powerful too. Again, they allow you to respond to things very quickly. So 2 quick PSA or 1 quick. I do have some stickers over there, and then out in the hallway, we're happy to answer questions afterwards. Why don't we spend about 5 minutes answering questions here in the room in case you have some shared questions, and then Ben and I will be outside answering questions too. So
I'll also say, before we take the first question, I'm just going to pull up our final slide, which is if you want to head out during the question section. Thank you for attending, first of all. Second of all, we have some resources up on the screen. The top one is the app-config user guide. So this is your resource for learning about all things app-config, including the concepts that we talked today. And then the bottom QR code is requesting a meeting. So if you have a more detailed use case that you'd like to talk through with us and our team, then feel free to use that link to request a meeting with us.
Okay, I'm looking at the clock. I want to make sure you all have time to get to your next session or lunch or whatever is next for you all. Ben and I will be right outside. I was going to do like trivia and give out, so I have some jackets, and I don't know how I'm going to allocate them. Maybe first come, first serve. We do have stickers sitting over there, so grab those. There should be enough for everybody.
Also, don't forget the survey.
Yeah, do the survey. And thank you all for coming.
Thank you
Enjoy
so
the
much.
rest of your reInvent.
Thank you.